All right. Aloha, everybody. Ghosts of Hawaii. You know who. Tonight, I'm going to do ghost stories again. And this time, we're going to go to a different location, equally as scary as the ones I have done in the past, if not more. So I'm going to wait for a few moments here or a minute or two to see if people show up. Hopefully, you are all doing well. I started a little bit late, so forgive me for being a little bit late. My cat is in heat. Need I say more? So that would have been really scary. James, it's good to see you. That would have been really, really scary. Me telling stories and you would have heard or something like that. You know how cats are, they make noise and stuff. Cute, love my cat. But I had to take care of that before coming on here this evening. Sheila, good to see you. Thank you for being here tonight. Oh, my friend, do you mind if I call you Ku? What's up, my friend? Ku is here tonight. He's going to be a guest later on next week. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the week, got a chance to talk with him today. Fantastic person. Loved what he had to share. And I think you folks are going to like it as well. And so he will be on. And I look forward to that as well. Again, tonight we're going to be doing ghost stories. I'm going to be doing it from a different location as far as where these stories emanate from. So bear in mind that I'm still kind of new to all of this. And on top of that, my pronunciation of the language for names and such, just bear with me with that. Hawaii is a place where we have many different cultures. We have people that have come from all over the world and they settled here in Hawaii. And of course, like I've said in the past, they've also brought with them their ghosts as well. So tonight we're going to be doing some scary stories that have to do with the Philippines. And we're going to be touching on a few of those stories tonight. But I got to tell you, doing ghost stories of the Philippines is like doing ghost stories. Lord Jubu, boo. I like that, Lord Jubu. Lord Jubu in the house, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to go and check out his channel. Occasionally me and him get together and we do collaborations as well. Doing ghost stories of the Philippines is sort of like doing ghost stories of Japan. It's a plethora of not only different types of ghosts, but also different types of entities, monsters, and so forth. So tonight I'm looking at the iceberg. I haven't even touched the tip. I just see the iceberg of all these wealth of stories and experiences that have to do with these ghosts. And so to give you an idea, before I begin tonight, of what we're looking at here, I'm going to be sharing with you folks the top 10 scariest local Filipino monsters in the Philippines, from Aswang to the White Lady. And that's what we're going to be doing right now. So this comes from wheninmanila.com, and I'm just sharing my reaction to all of this. Aristocat, it is good to see you. I'm sharing with you folks my reaction to all of this. Growing up here in Hawaii, I've had experiences with people sharing stories about the ghosts of the Philippines or some of these entities as well. I'm sure Lord Jubu as well and other people have had their experiences as well, or have heard of these experiences. Thank you, Joyce. Yes, welcome everybody. Have a seat. You know, this is like in the old days. Over here, you don't have to worry about nothing. No social distancing. Just sit down, relax. If you like, turn off your lights, and let's settle in. And we'll share some of these ghost stories. I have a few tonight. Trust me, there's going to be a series. Yeah. We'll see how far it goes, Lord Jubu. I'm just, going into this whole subject matter right now. So let's look at this. And again, feel free to talk amongst yourselves. If I don't actually respond to you because I'm reading stories, or even if I have a guest, if I don't respond right away, it's nothing personal, okay? Nothing personal at all. And of course, if you like this channel and you're new here, please like and subscribe. Here we do ghost stories, visit to haunted locations. We do interviews with people that have actually experienced the paranormal. And I know in the future we're having Lord Jubu as a guest, and that's going to be fantastic as well. So let's go into the top 10 most scariest Let me read that again, folks. This is my reaction to that. Top 10 scariest local Filipino monsters in the Philippines, from Aswang to the White Lady. We're not going to be covering all of them tonight. As a matter of fact, to be more specific, I'm probably going to be only doing like 2 out of the many monsters that are spirits that are here in this list. And there's more than that. Believe me, what I'm reading to you, there's a lot more than that. The Philippines has been a fantastic source of stories, and I've always been intrigued by that. So let's look at number 10. Coming in at number 10, again, don't mind me with my pronunciation, the duwende, which is a goblin, elf, or dwarf. They are small, childlike creatures who dwell in houses, trees, underground mounds, and rural areas. Duwende usually come out at noon for about an hour, and at night as well. They can be good or mischievous depending on how you treat them. Thus, the expression tabi tabi po is often used to give respect to the presence of duendes. Keep on losing things the moment you need them, only to find them later on. Maybe you just got punked by a dwarf. I'm just reading what it says. Okay? This is what this is what the person wrote, so I'm going with that. Coming in at number 9, I thought this ghost would be like number 1, but it's not number 1. But coming in at number 9, for all of you that follow the ghost stories and entities of the Philippines, is the White Lady. Okay, before I say anything more about the White Lady, and you might be hearing other things to emphasize a point more than once, but these are terrifying ghosts, okay? And there'll be an explanation in this why, but it gets even more intense. They are wandering spirits of women who died of injustice, victims of rape, kidnapping, etc., and seeking for revenge or closure. Depicted in a white dress, a white lady sometimes also can be found in black or red depending on their mood and season. Feel their presence with their hair-raising wails and weightless roaming. Their favorite spots are houses, roads, and the back seat of cars. Sometimes you'd also see them through your rear view mirror when you're driving alone at night. Any space for chance passengers? As if you got a choice. That's what I'm reading here, guys, okay? I'll give my reaction to all of this once I'm done going through this list. Okay, now coming in at number 8 is the Kapre, or the Kapri. Tall, dark, and rather filthy giants whose hobby is hiding atop large trees, preferably old mango trees. They smoke rolls of cigar, and their pastime is to scare children and vacationers away. If you find yourself stuck in a place and just going around in circles, you might have been plagued by the Kapre, or Kapri. I say Kapri, let's go with that. In such case, remove, I don't know what this means, but remove your top and reverse it before wearing it on again. I'm just reading what I see here, folks. Coming in at number 7, the Siyokoi, mermaid and merman. Mythical creatures of the ocean. The Sirena is female and has a human body and a fish tail. Its mesmerizing beauty is said to attract fishermen and tourists and lure them to the seas until they're never to be found again. On the other hand, the Siyokoi, the male counterpart, takes a human form with scaled bodies. They have gills on the neck, and for the lower extremities, they have either fishtails or scaled legs and webbed feet. They are said to drown humans for their own consumption. Okay? Here we go at number 6, the tik-tik. The tik-tik is a bird that serves as a spotter for its master, which is the aswang. Some say it's the alter ego of aswang. The tik-tik emits a unique loud chirp, tick, 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 that serves as a warning to the victims. When it's loud, it means the aswang is still far from the victim. Cue to run for your life. The cry gets fainter as the aswang approaches closer. Isn't that scary? I mean, I'm not in any way, guys, not in any way at all am I being sarcastic. That's a very intelligent entity to do that. That's terrifying. It really is. At number five, I know this one pretty well because I've talked to people that have mentioned this to me. It is a type of Aswang. An Aswang, by the way, folks, if you look at the word Aswang, it is an umbrella word. It means many different types of a certain type of spirit, vampiric in nature. One of the variations of Aswang is a typical monster. They are not that photogenic and neat. At night, these winged creatures separate their torso from their body and use the upper half to fly on top of houses and prey on fetuses of pregnant women. For dinner, they extend their long, sharp tongues from the rooftop to the navels of their victims. In case you see the lower half of the Manangal's body, drench them with whatever spices and vinegar you have because they are allergic to anything savory. This person has a sense of humor. Coming in at number four is the Tikbalang. They are mythical creatures with a horse's head, a human's body, and a horse's feet. They are fond of raping females to give birth to more Tikbalang. Did I say just now? Oh, I haven't said it, yeah? So let me say it right now. These shows are not for kids. If you have kids around, guys, tell them to go to another room, go watch something on Netflix, whatever. Please don't let them listen to this because some of this stuff is very much so adult in nature. They also like to trick travelers into getting lost in mountains or forest areas. Coming in at number three, the Tiyanak. They are said to be babies who died without receiving baptism rites. A Tiyanak can also be the offspring of a woman and a demon, or an aborted fetus who comes back to seek revenge on its mother. They often disguise themselves as a normal baby, but once the prey comes closer, that's the time they reveal their monstrous form. Coming in at number two is the Bruja, also known as the Mangkukulam. They are said to be people, especially women, who possess supernatural powers and have the ability to cast evil spells on their victims. They are the bad witches. They use dark magic. The Bruja is often stereotyped as donning a black dress, wearing too much dark makeup on, and having unkempt hair. And at number one, who would have thought, I think it's appropriate, is in fact the Aswang. Aswang is a legendary humanoid, which is sort of a cross between a vampire and a witch. Regular townspeople by day, they become cannibals with a voracious appetite for human flesh by night. They can also transform into either a black boar or a huge dog. I also heard of them as being pigs and cats. And the way you can tell an Aswang in their animal form is that they don't have any tails. Some say that they are mostly female and they prefer butchering as an occupation. So the next time you see that quiet and elusive lady butcher at your town, better be careful or else. Again, this is from a website. Okay, with all of that said, that's the top 10 from what I read on this site right here for the most scariest that they have in the Philippines. Tonight, we're going to be going through several different types of stories. Mainly to start off, we're going to go with stories. There's a few of them tonight. We're going to go with the Aswang, and we're also going to go with the White Lady. And then I'm going to throw in another interesting set of stories that I hope that you will like as well. So let's take a look here at the White Lady. We'll start with her. And what I want to do is to get a little bit more comprehensive to give you folks a better idea of what this terrifying ghost is all about. So we're going to be looking at her and discussing the stories. Well, a few stories, I should say. There'll be more later on as well. So here we go. A white lady is a type of female ghost dressed in all white, reportedly seen in rural areas and associated with some local legends of tragedy. Common to many of these legends is the theme of loss of a daughter or betrayal of a husband. Perhaps the most famous white lady story is about the White Lady of Ballet Drive in Quezon City, Philippines. Some say she was raped and killed by Japanese soldiers during World War II. Others say she was raped and killed by a taxi driver when she was walking home alone late at night. Either way, many have reported seeing her along Ballet Drive. Many of them are taxi drivers claiming to have seen her face in their rear view mirrors. One cab driver said he gave a beautiful woman a ride one night, only to turn around and see that she was completely covered in blood and bruises. He ran from his car in terror. One popular story from my own hometown goes like this. A young woman was raped and decapitated by Japanese soldiers who buried her head apart from her body. A headless white lady has since been seen roaming the area in search of her missing head. To explain the origin in the case of the White Lady of Ballet Drive, some say that the story was fabricated by a bored reporter in the 1950s, but it is unclear where the White Lady story came from or where these stories emerged in the Philippines. However, a common trend in White Lady stories is that these women are often murdered by Spanish American or Japanese soldiers, meaning that they at least date back to the arrival of the Spanish in the Philippines. That's the White Lady. Her origins are, I don't know, that just kind of gives me the creeps. So let's go into some stories about the White Lady as well. Again, hope you folks are all doing okay tonight. We were driving to Manila when we crossed the first bridge from our hometown. My daughter just got back from school. It was just around 5 o'clock p.m., but it was already dark. So we turned the headlights on. But just as we crossed the bridge, the lights went off. And to my horror, I saw a white lady sitting next to my daughter at the back seat. She had no face, but the fact that she sat next to my precious daughter was enough to make me want to move somewhere else. I don't think I can ever cross that bridge again. Now, the interesting thing about that, it seems to be like almost like a hybrid story, because if you're familiar with Japanese ghosts, then you folks know about the Nopero Bull. Yeah, that's true, Lord Jugo. If you know anything about the Nopero Bull or the Mojina, then you know that she is a faceless woman, a trickster type spirit in Japan. So with that said, is it possible that something else was thrown into the elements here? Think about the fact with the Japanese soldiers that came to the Philippines as well. These are just ideas as I present them to you here. So it's possible. I mean, I'm just saying that if it is, that's interesting, very interesting. We're going to another story. This one, I got to tell you before I tell you, when I do these stories, you know that sometimes I get scared. This story really, really scared me. It really scared me. Thank you, Intricate. Good to see you. It really, truly scared me. So I'm going to share this with you right now. Ooh, got to get myself ready for this. Okay, so here we go. This is called a Filipino ghost story, which kind of is interesting because she is in my opinion, she is the epitome of the ghost stories, along with the Aswang and everything that are truly terrifying. So let me get this situated here, folks. When I was younger, There were these series of books called Haunted Philippines and True Philippine Ghost Stories that contain ghost stories and paranormal experiences from various people across the country. Some stories were in English, while the rest were in Tagalog. They were quick to read and had numerous volumes. Sometimes they even had a section of ghost pictures near the end. You know, the kind nonchalant landscape or family pics with a blurry figure circled in red. Some of them actually looked convincing and downright creepy. I love that series, though I should have enjoyed them while they lasted. As of last year, they seem to have been discontinued and are difficult to find in bookstores now. To me, these books were good entertainment. Growing up in the Philippines provided no shortage of ghost stories and mythical legends. It seemed like everyone had a story to tell or knew someone who had one. I've had a handful of relatives in my family who had one. I've had, in my family who claimed to have had encounters with a ghost, as we called them in our native tongue, multo. I never thought I'd have my own stories to share, but that quickly changed very recently. My family and I have recently taken a trip back to the Philippines. It was long overdue, as I had not seen my relatives and my home country in several years. It was also a bit strange to see all my younger cousins grown up. It was a great experience, though, just to see them all again and spend time with them. On our first week, there we were on our way back to my aunt's house from a long day of shopping, when the conversation in the car turned to supernatural occurrences. Our culture is heavy on religion and tradition, and we can be very superstitious at times. There are numerous stories of mythical monsters in Filipino culture, and hearing about them from my parents and relatives only furthered my interest. They include the Tikbalang, which was a monster that frequented the forests in the mountains. It is described as a large humanoid creature with the head and limbs of a horse. The Kapre was more of a tale for kids. It's described as a tall troll-like creature that resides in large trees where it smokes a cigar, waiting to scare off children that are out late at night. He's usually regarded as non-violent though. Another one is a Tiyanak, and they're the stuff of nightmares. In remote areas near forests, you'd hear the faint crying of a baby. If you followed these sounds deep into the woods, it could lead you to being perpetually lost. Or if you were really unlucky, you'd find the source. You'd stumble upon what looks like a baby on the ground, but in actuality, it's a small, ghastly creature that will transform and eat you if you got too close. Then there's the Aswang, a shapeshifter that feeds on human flesh at night. A specific species of them called a manangal, which translates literally to remover, is a particularly terrifying one. By day, they are in the form of a regular woman, but by night they feed. They root their legs to the ground as their top half detaches itself, sprouts bat-like wings, and takes flight. They mainly target pregnant women, and they have long vine-like tongues that slither down and eat the fetus as they hover right outside the window. I know, pretty crazy stuff, right? I've always regarded these tales with a healthy amount of salt and a full dose of fear. They were cool and unique, but I could happily live the rest of my life not encountering any of them if they were indeed real. Even when I moved to America, I was still wary of those regional creatures. Anyways, during the car ride, my cousins spoke of strange sightings and experiences they had, all with varying degrees of believability and silliness. My dad relayed some tales from his younger years about how his group of friends would encounter this and that. He was always ever so dramatic with his storytelling. It was all in good fun, but throughout the whole conversation, my mom remained quiet. She was a hard skeptic type, and would always dismiss these stories as silly folklore. However, that at that moment it looked like she had something to say. My curiosity took over, and I finally asked her if she had any ghostly encounters. She looked at me and nodded. Back during her college years, when she was studying to be a nurse, she lived on the campus of a very old school, not too far from the city that I was born in. Living conditions were pretty rough, and four of them had to share a room half the size of a normal American college dorm. On top of that, the campus used to be an old infirmary during World War II. Hundreds of soldiers from both sides passed through and died within the walls of that hospital. Residents of the dorms would speak of strange noises in the night. Footsteps, faint echoes, and knocking were heard in certain parts of the building. There were rumors that the place was also a temporary orphanage at one point in time, and that a handful of children had died there. They said you could hear children's laughter in the walls if you listened closely. On more than one occasion, my mom and her roommates would wake up to faint shuffling noises in the room, like someone small was moving about. When they looked around, they wouldn't see anyone, so they dismissed it and went back to sleep. It wouldn't be until the following morning that they saw what looked like footprints on the walls and ceiling. They were the size of a child's. One of her roommates moved out after that. One night, a close friend of my mom was heading back to her room after a late study session. She was wary of the supernatural, so she kept her head down and walked quickly through the halls. As she passed by one of the empty rooms, something caught her eye. That large room used to be a triage area when the place was still a hospital. The old rusted beds were left there, abandoned, and the room was used for storage. She said she saw half a dozen men lying on the beds. They looked injured and bandaged, and they wore what looked like the uniform of an American soldier from World War II. She stood frozen in place as she felt the coldest chill she ever experienced in her life. Then one of the soldiers sat straight up and slowly turned towards her. That was enough to snap her back to her senses, and she took off running towards her room. When she got to her dorm and told her friends what she saw, the brave ones of the group headed to the room to investigate. When they got there, the beds were empty. Ever the skeptic, my mom didn't put much stock in those stories. That is, until one early morning when she experienced something that challenged her stance and bothers her to this day. In the mornings before classes, my mom would wake up extra early so she can get her first dibs on the showers in the community bathrooms. It wasn't too hard, since a lot of the residents had convinced themselves that the place really was haunted and were unwilling to venture out of their own that early. My mom mostly ignored those stories, and she always got to class early. That morning, she did her usual routine, and it went off without a hitch. As she was walking back to her room, she heard it. She said it sounded like whispers. She stopped and turned around. Down the hallway, a figure stood just at the edge of darkness. The lights weren't in the best condition in that wing, so it was dim. So my mom could discern that the figure was dressed like a nun. That didn't make any sense, since there were no nuns on campus, and the nearest church was several miles away. Standing completely calm, my mom turned and walked away. She quickened her pace, and her own footsteps echoed in the empty hall. She strained to hear any other noises but heard none. When she turned right to another hallway, she saw the nun from the corner of her eye. It was closer and definitely following her. As she got closer to her dorm, she turned around once more. The nun was at the end of the hall, just as far away from her when she first saw it. The nun stood still, as if she'd been standing there the whole time. My mom quickly reached her door and struggled to unlock it. During one more look, she turned to her left, but the nun was gone. Relieved, she turned the lock. As she did, she moved to pick up her stuff and felt an unnaturally cold chill. She slowly looked right, and it was right there, the nun, on the other end of the hall, except now she was much closer and fully in the light. On instinct, my mom turned the knob and threw her door open. And that's when the child ran out. A small kindergarten-aged child ran out of her dorm, brushed past her leg, and ran towards the nun. The child was laughing innocently as if playing a game of tag. My mom watched as the child ran past the nun and disappeared into another room. After a few moments, the nun turned and followed the child. My mom asked around after that experience and learned that the last time there were children or nuns in the campus was back when it was a temporary orphanage several years ago. They shut it down after a tragic fire killed a dozen children and a few nuns looking after them. She never experienced anything else out of the ordinary after that. After she told that story, we all sat stunned in our seats. Mom had been holding out on me. I was thrilled, but also terrified of what I just heard. See, at the time, I had a passive interest in the paranormal. It wasn't anything serious and nowhere near obsession levels. I wasn't out to prove that the afterlife existed, nor was I determined to find out if ghosts and spirits were real to find some sort of meaning in this chaotic world. Did I believe in the supernatural? Not really. But I'd be open to the possibility. My interest in the subject was purely recreational, like someone who enjoys horror movies or knitting sweaters. In fact, while I like reading up on urban legends and enjoy hearing ghost stories, I'm also terrified by them. My imagination, fueled by stuff I've read and scary movies I've watched, would always get the best of me when I'm alone in the dark. It was a sort of interesting paradox, kind of like how at one point in my childhood, I was fascinated by snakes as animals, but I was deathly afraid of encountering one out in the wild. To be honest, I was still a little bit jealous of my mom that she had such a cool story to tell. I wish at that moment I had my own story. Well, you know what they say about being careful with what you wish for. Yeah. Later on in the trip, we visited my uncle who lived a few towns over. There he lived with his family, where he ran a very lucrative farming business. On the way there, we passed a long bridge that went over a steep ravine with a river below. As our car rode along the bridge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of deja vu. It made sense since I traveled over this bridge many times before when I visited my uncles and cousins. However, underneath that feeling was a sense of unadulterated fear and dread, like something bad had happened here, and it somehow directly affected me. A distant memory, screaming to be remembered. As if on cue, my dad pointed out that this bridge was infamous to the surrounding towns and cities because of the White Lady. Now, like the Capre or the Tikbalang, the White Lady is another one of the unique ghost stories told all around the country. She is perhaps the most well-known, since different countries also have their own version. In America, she is usually called the Lady in White. In Spanish culture, she's called La Lorna. The basic idea remains the same. A ghostly looking woman dressed in a long white dress and long dark hair stands on the side of isolated roads, waiting to hitch a ride. The scenarios vary, but in the Philippines, if you stopped and gave her a ride, she would quietly enter your back seat. If you don't interact with her, she'll leave you alone until she disappears from your car some distance later. If you see her on the road and keep driving, she will suddenly appear in your car and attack you. Moral is, it's better to give her a ride than not. When we arrived at my uncle's large house, I couldn't shake the feeling that the bridge had somehow directly affected me. After a delicious dinner and a round of video games with my cousins, I found my uncle out in the balcony having a drink. He offered me a beer since I was finally old enough to have one, and I took a seat next to him. Hey Tito, do you remember anything about that bridge right outside of town? He put his drink down and regarded me for a few moments. He cut straight to the chase. You were really young when it happened. I suppose you don't remember it much. Now, I was fully intrigued. I had to know. What exactly happened? His warm smile faded, and he told his tale. As the story went on, the memories began to flood my mind. Memories that I had long since repressed as a defense mechanism. All the details came to me in excruciating clarity, as if it happened just yesterday. By the time he had finished the story, there was no denying it. I had encountered a ghost all those years ago. It was the mid-90s, and I was still living in the Philippines. I was a plucky 6-year-old that was all about adventure and exploring. Once or twice a week, I would spend the night at my uncle's farm. Back then, a small budding business that he had. The town it was in was smaller then and fairly remote. I loved that place because there were so many areas to explore, but only in the daytime. One particular night, I was over at his place just watching TV. My uncle got a call of a new delivery of chicken feed that needed to be picked up in the next town. At the time, he only had a few farmhands, and they all had the night off. Usually, he wouldn't make a supply run this late at night, but he was behind schedule and needed to pick up the supplies or risk losing profit. As he headed out, he asked me if I wanted to tag along. Ever the restless child, I immediately agreed. My uncle had an old Toyota SUV that he used for all his delivery pickups. I sat in the second row, my usual spot, while my uncle slid into the driver's seat. Most of the voyage was uneventful. It was nearly 11 p.m. at night, so there was hardly any other vehicles on the road. Upon crossing the bridge the first time, nothing happened. During that time, the bridge was newly constructed. It was put up the year before, after the original bridge was ravaged by the last typhoon. The city even put streetlights on the new bridge for better visibility. That was a huge deal, since none of the other surrounding roads had streetlights. We arrived at the next town, and I helped my uncle load up the supplies. Well, at least as much as a small 6-year-old can. On the way back home was when it happened. I was sitting in the back seat, absent-mindedly looking out the window, when I felt the car slow down. We were almost at the bridge, and I noticed that something wasn't right. I was too small to see over the seat and out the windshield, but I could tell that all the lights on the bridge were off. At this point, the car slowed to a crawl. "Hey, sport, why don't you lie down and take a little nap?" my uncle said from the front. Something in his voice didn't sound right. It sounded like he was scared and was struggling to hide it. "No, that's okay. I'm not tired. Please just do it for me, okay?" He sounded stern but measured. My uncle was usually an easygoing guy, so when he got serious, you know you should pay attention. Okay, I said as I laid down on the seat sideways. I briefly saw my uncle's eyes in the rearview mirror. They showed unmistakable fear. I felt the familiar bump that signaled that we were on the bridge. Then the car stopped. Close your eyes, okay? No matter what, keep them closed. Okay. I started to get scared. I didn't know what was happening or why I had to close my eyes. Regardless, I shut them tight. Then the strangest thing happened. My uncle started to sing. It was a traditional Filipino folk song, and I only heard it once before, about a year ago. My aunt and uncle got into a shouting match, as in things were thrown across the room type of shouting match. I was at their house at that time, and my cousins and I stayed in their room, cowering and waiting for the storm to pass. An hour later, my uncle entered the room and apologized for the shouting. He then started singing that song to us to lull us to sleep. The melody was beautiful, and I never known my uncle could sing that well. He never did it again. At least, not until that moment. When we were in that dark bridge, the song sounded just as beautiful, but I could tell his voice was shaking. His car wasn't that big, but I was a small child and there was a lot of room in the second row. I was lying down on a seat perpendicular to the windows, trying and hoping for sleep to come. Instead, something else arrived. Click, click. I heard the familiar mechanism of the headlights flashing. All of a sudden, I sensed that I wasn't alone in that second row anymore. My spatial awareness of the car told me that there was someone or something else sitting right next to me. We had gained another passenger. I shut my eyes even tighter as my uncle began to drive. The temperature inside the car became cold. I curled myself into a ball, seeking refuge from whatever it was that was now right next to me. I didn't know much about ghosts and supernatural creatures at that age. And though I couldn't see it, something told me that I was in the presence of something not of this world. My uncle finished the song and started over again. I was amazed that he was able to keep his composure. I refused to open my eyes. And that's when I could hear her. So uncomfortably close next to me. At first, I heard what sounded like clicking. As it increased in volume, it sounded like stalks of celery being twisted and broken. Crack, 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 crack. It was unnerving. Those sounds weren't normal. They were all around me. We finally crossed over the bridge, but she was still there. I was so scared. I could barely move. The car hit a bump, which caused me to slide to the side, closer to her. I felt damp cloth against my leg. My breaths became shallow and I started to cry. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I opened my eyes for a split second. In that split second, I saw her. A brief flash of white with stringy, damp hair on her head, blacker than night. She was turned away from me. I blinked the tears from my eyes. When I opened them again, the mass of black hair was now right in front of my face. I shut my eyes tight again. After what seemed like an eternity, the car hit a familiar curve on the road that signaled the entrance into our town. I felt that entity come even closer to me. By this time, my uncle was silent. No more songs. The air became even colder right next to my face, and I shook not from the cold, but from terror. Then she spoke right into my ear. It was a hushed whisper, lower than any whisper I've ever heard. I couldn't make out what she said. It didn't sound threatening or angry. It sounded sad. And then she was gone. I immediately felt the difference. I could no longer feel another presence in the car, and the air went from cold to tropical humid again. I heard my uncle breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't open my eyes until we had reached the safety of the farm. My uncle had to carry me back inside and straight into my bed, and only then did I open my eyes. From what I could recall, we never spoke of that night to anyone, not even each other, ever again. Subsequent trips across the bridge at night never resulted in another white lady sighting, at least not for me. I'd find out later that in the early 80s, a woman was found dead at the bottom of that bridge. People said that she was traveling to the next town and was hoping to catch a ride with any passing vehicles. It was late at night, and she had no family nearby that could give her a ride. No one knows what really happened, but many suspected that it was murder. After my trip back to the Philippines, I couldn't stop thinking about that night at the bridge. How could I forget such an incredible and terrifying experience? I guess it doesn't matter, since I remember it now. But there was something else I realized about that night. Something I hadn't remembered before. When I heard her whisper, I thought I only heard unintelligible garble. But that's not true. She did say something. She said, "Maraming salamat." Translated to English, that means, "Thank you very much." Uh, I've heard many stories, and I've told a lot of stories as well, both my own stories that were shared with me as well. Many different types of experiences with ghosts, but never in my life, never once in my life have I ever heard a story like that. In Hawaii, we talk about phantom hitchhikers. And I've had my share of people share things with me about that. But to be in the back seat of a car, you see what I'm saying? To be in the back seat of a car, and that spirit is there with you, sharing space with you there, in whatever way a spirit can share that. Thank you, Ozzy. I appreciate that. That's incredible. It's. I mean, it scares you, but at the same time, it just pulls you in to the idea that when people share these stories, that yeah, there's something to be said about them. That they're not, at times, they're not just somebody making something up, putting it out there into their communities to just scare people. And that's why when I was reading that story to you folks, I could feel that. I could feel everything in that story. So now, if you don't mind, we're going to switch over and we're going to talk about the Aswang. And I promise in later shows, we're also going to be talking about other different types of ghosts and entities of the Philippines. Also, we're going to be doing Japan as well. So this is my first story about the Aswang. A young woman in her early 20s who grew up in Manila decided to spend summer with her in-laws at a town in the Visayas region. It was her older sister who married and lived with these folks. But her sister passed away recently. The young woman wanted to pay respects to her sister's grave and at the same time get to know her in-laws. And so she traveled to the barrio and was welcomed warmly. Everyone was really happy to see her, especially her sister's daughter, who's almost her age too. The young woman dressed differently than the people of the barrio, who are conservative and plain. Her distinctive jewelries, watch, earrings, and necklace definitely made her stood out. Throughout the day, she noticed that the relatives, although they were very nice to her, they appeared to avoid eye contact with her. Even her sister's widower behaves the same way, but they kept on looking at her jewelries and the way she was dressed. She also noticed the eerie environment of the house to the point that it was creepy. She was scared at first, but thought that it must be normal in their province to behave in such a way. Besides, her niece is not like the older folks, and she's all the company needed to erase all her doubts. Night came to the small barrio, and everyone was finished in their supper and chores. The young woman could feel the stares of her in-laws, while she and her niece were exchanging stories, which she finds very uncomfortable. She excused herself and proceeded to the bedroom to rest. Since the house is not that big, she was assigned to share the room with her niece. Before they slept, her sister's daughter asked if she could wear her earrings, necklace, and other accessories while they were sleeping, of which she agreed. They closed the lights and bade each other a good night. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, she was awakened by the sound of hushed noises and a strong, putrid stench. She felt movement inside the room and knew that someone was there, but continued to pretend to be asleep. Her heart was pounding and she was very afraid. She peeped a bit and saw it was really dark, but she could make out silhouettes of a man and two aging women, although they seemed really different. She almost screamed for help and to run away, but not a part of her body could move. Then they were whispering something about the jewelry and the watch. Then, in human hands, tried to feel her wrist and neck. A little later, she felt her sister's daughter, their own child, being lifted away. Then everyone was gone from the house. A few minutes later, she got up, took her things, and ran away as fast as possible. Luckily, the next barrio is not too far away, and there she waited at the bus station. The next morning, when there was daylight, news traveled fast as there was a young lady found dead in the neighboring barrio, said to be eaten by Aswangs because most of her insides were missing. She was almost unrecognizable, but they said she wore a lot of jewelry on her body. It was then she realized that her niece was eaten by her own family of Aswangs. A breath of relief came out of her when she saw the bus to the next town arriving. Okay, there's a connection, like I've mentioned before, um, with people coming from different places in the world here to Hawaii and bringing their ghosts, their heritage, their culture, their food along with them. There are stories of Aswang here in Hawaii, also of the Wak Wak or the Tik Tik. As a matter of fact, one is said to haunt a bridge near Lake Wilson in Wahiwa. Luckily, I'm many miles away from Wahiwa. But just to think that I share the same island as these types of entities, that's pretty darn scary. This next story is called Hilut Turned to be the Aswang. Do you believe in superstitions? In this modern age, we could hardly say yes, but in older times, they believe it's real. Based on some real stories that have happened. This incident, according to my grandfather. In 1960, there was a couple. The husband's name was Ben and the wife Bilen. After 2 years of marriage, the couple was blessed because Bilen conceived a child. During those days, traditionally, the woman who will give birth will have her baby at home with the help of the hilot, described as an expert woman who can deliver a mother in labor, much like the midwives of today. But they never undergo studies. They were blessed women who knew how to do such things. The day came when Bilen was to deliver her baby. Usually the person inside the room is the hilot, as an assistant. But in this case, it was only the hilot because that was what the hilot wanted. There was no other person in the room. A healthy baby boy came out safely after some hours of Bilen's labor. But something unusual happened. A healthy baby boy came out safely from Bilen's labor, but something was very odd. When Ben came into the room to get the usual things from a delivery, bed sheets and clothes, to his surprise, he finds little to no blood. He's wondering why this is and asked the hilot what had happened. The hilot just shrugged and never said a word. Ben never suspected anything from her since he trusted her. Ben, however, did tell his family about what had happened. But then later they forgotten it when all was well with his wife and his baby. Eventually his wife was not doing well. Each day she looked paler and paler and got weaker as well. The hilot would still come, however, to visit the mother and the baby every day. Bilen never spoke much after giving birth, but continued to feel weak. The hilot would then say, "It's normal for a new mother to experience this." And Ben believed her. Until one day when Bilin suddenly died. And later, after some days, the baby was dead too. They found out that the baby had died from blood loss. By then, they searched for the Hilut, but she had disappeared and was nowhere to be found. They believed that the Hilut sipped the mother's blood and the baby. It is then everyone says the Hilut was not human, but something far, far worse. People believe she was an Aswang who disguised herself without the family's knowing. And this, it's this kind of story that makes me pause, because if you start to dwell more into the Philippines and the Aswang and the White Lady and all these other entities within the stories of the Aswang, you find out how clever, yes, Aswang the vampire, how clever this entity is. They can disguise themselves in your towns, in your cities, and you wouldn't know who they were. It's hard to explain, but to me that's chilling. This Aswang was able to infiltrate this family and look like someone that was there for the best of reasons and ended up doing the most terrifying thing. There's ways, by the way, to kill an Aswang. We'll get into that in the future with some other stories that I tell you about, with Filipino ghost stories. There is a way to confront these creatures as well. Just so you folks know. And yes, they can, like Lord Jubu said, they can shapeshift. Actually, they can even, these entities are so terrifying, they can actually take something like a plant, like a banana tree, and make it look like the victim that they had just killed is still alive. Make that tree look like the victim that victim is still alive, but slowly over time, the victim dies. And then you find out that it isn't that person at all. And by the time you realize who the victim is, and what has happened to the victim, and that it wasn't the victim, the Aswang is gone. It already did what it did. That's terrifying, to think that they can actually do that. So we're going to deviate a bit now. Like I said, there's a lot of things. I'm going to share with you 2 more stories, and I'm going to share with you something that I think you'll find quite interesting as well. So these stories have nothing to do with the Aswang or the White Lady. This is called, and this is something I'm going to be doing probably in the month of Halloween. I'm going to be doing stories about exorcisms. Yes, there is. You can use talisman. You can actually use a type of ointment or a type of liquid. I forget what it was called, but you can use that. It'll actually tell you if the Aswang is nearby. This story is called The Exorcism of Clarita Villanueva. Clarita is a 17-year-old Filipino girl who had known a life of tragedy. She did not remember her father. She did not know if he had died or had deserted her mother. Excuse me. Her mother was a fortune teller by vocation. The girl was brought up watching her mother holding seances, communicating with the dead, and using clairvoyance to predict to people what they could expect in the future. Her mother took money from people for her services and then laughed at them behind their backs. To her, it was all just a game, a means of making a living by duping unsuspected and gullible people. When Clarita was 12 years old, her mother died. Since she did not have any immediate family to take her in and care for her, She turned to prostitution for survival. At 18, she moved to Manila with her boyfriend, but found out that he was already married to another woman. So she began working as an exotic dancer. The big city was a hiding place, a center of money and vice for her business. But one morning at 2 a.m. on the streets of downtown Manila, Clarita was picked up by the police, who suspected her of being a vagrant or a homeless person. The policemen called for a vehicle, and Clarita was taken to the ancient Bilibid prison, used as the city jail. Bilibid has been a prison for over 300 years. It was built by the Spanish and used by the Americans, the Filipinos, and the Japanese as a prison and a place of torment. 2 days after Clarita was incarcerated, they were struck by the strangest phenomenon to ever hit the prison in its 300-year history. This young woman was bitten severely on her body by unseen and unknown alien entities. She claimed there was two of them, a huge monster-like spirit and a smaller one. They sunk their fangs and teeth deep into her flesh, making deep indentions. They would bite her neck, back, legs, and arms simultaneously. Blood flowed mostly underneath her skin from the bites. The 18-year-old girl screamed in horror and fainted. The guards and medics heard the commotion and came running to the women's division of the prison. The other female inmates pointed to the tormented girl on a cot. The girl was taken to the prison hospital for observation and treatment, where all the doctors declared that they had never seen anything like it. These strange demonic bites began to occur daily, baffling all who saw it. Dr. Mariano Lara, the chief medical examiner at the prison, appealed for help through the media and permitted many to view the strange phenomenon. Filipino, Chinese, and American doctors, university professors, and other professionals were called in to analyze the situation. After 3 awful weeks of this torture, a radio reporter came to Bilibid and taped a session while the doctors were violently struggling with Clarita. The reporter immediately released his story on a local radio station just after the 10 o'clock news. The news media soon caught wind of the occurrence and sent more reporters out to investigate. The newspapers, radio stations, and magazines found it their kind of story and began to publicize it. Even the cartoonists were soon drawing pictures of the entities from Clarita's descriptions as the bites continued day by day. The UPI and other world news services began to report the phenomenon worldwide. This incident made the front page of many newspapers: Switzerland, France, Germany, England, Canada, even the United States. One doctor accused the girl of putting on an act in order to only to get publicity. Clarita gazed at the doctor and said, "You will die." He didn't feel anything at the moment, but the following day, the doctor expired without even getting sick. He simply died. Fear-struck, the city, when they heard the news, was in terror of this girl. The girl was not only a harlot, they said, she was also a witch who could speak curses upon human beings and they would die. The chief jailer had a confrontation with the girl. He had kicked her for something she had done wrong while rebelling against him. Clarita looked at the jailer in cold, inhuman hate and said, "You will die." Within 4 days, the man was dead and buried, the second person to fall victim to her curse. Dr. Lara and his medical staff were deeply concerned. They had a prisoner who certainly was not crazy, but who was being wildly attacked by unseen entities and being bitten deeply on all parts of her body by creatures no one else could see. They were afraid that this thing would kill them as it had the two others who dared cross it. It was their responsibility to do something for the girl, yet they had no earthly idea what to do about the situation. It was beyond their medical knowledge. Who were these alien entities? The large one, Clarita said, was a monster in size. He was black and very hairy. He had fangs that came down on each side of his mouth, plus a set of buck teeth all the way around. The doctors verified her description by the teeth marks on her body. Buck teeth solid, all the way around the bite, rather than sharp teeth in the front. The smaller entity was almost like a dwarf. He would climb up her body to bite her upper torso. Both of these spirits liked to bite her where there was a lot of flesh, like the back of her leg, the back of her neck, the fleshy part of her upper arms. They would bite deep into her, leaving ugly, painful bruises. Dr. Laura and his assistants called in all sort of observers, medical doctors, surgeons, psychiatrists, and professors from the Far East, universities, and so on. They claimed they saw bite marks appear out of nowhere on Clarita's arms. Dr. Laura also described the bite marks as otherworldly because they were too large and round. A human bite is elliptical and seemed to have been made by molars. No one had ever witnessed such strange and demonic behavior, nor did they know any solution to the problem. They all wondered who would be the next victim of her curse. Dr. Laura and his staff sent out word globally, "Come and help us. Please help us." In the end, hopelessness urged them to finally resort to an exorcism. Reverend Lester Sumrall heeded the call. Because I was a foreigner in the Philippines, I went to the mayor's office and asked permission to see Clarita. He granted me his permission, but warned me that several people had been injured by the girl and that 2 had been cursed and were dead. I went with the understanding that I would not sue the government if I was hurt, and that I would not complain if mistreated. When I arrived at the prison, the head doctor of 6 physicians and Dr. Laura was skeptical of this foreign minister, but he finally permitted me to see the girl. Clarita was brought into a special room where the Reverend was waiting with a large group of news reporters, foreign members of the press, university professors, and medical doctors who had been invited by Dr. Laura. As Clarita was being led into the room, she looked at them and said nothing. But when she saw Reverend Sumrall, she screamed violently, "I hate you!" That was the beginning of the confrontation. There was a raging battle with the girl, with blasphemy to God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Her eyes were burning coals of fire and fuel of hate. I commanded the evil spirit to release her. And after a 3-day confrontation with the devil in her, the miracle of God came upon her. She relaxed, smiled, and said, "He's gone," indicating that the thing went out the window. So like I said, in the month of October, I'll be doing a show, maybe more than one, but definitely one on exorcisms. And as I was doing research for this particular show, that came upon, it caught my attention. I came upon that. It caught my attention. This is another story. It's called, Did Teresita Basa Come Back from the Dead to Solve Her Own Murder? Firefighters responded to a call and arrived at a Chicago apartment to put out a fire. They responded that the fire was confined to the room 15B of a certain Teresita Basa. When they went inside the room and got the fire under control, they were welcomed by a terrifying discovery: the burned, unclothed body of the girl covered up by a mattress. Investigators who arrived at the scene suspected that it was a case of rape murder. Other than a note that read, "Get tickets for AS," written by the victim herself, there was no other clues that would lead them to the culprit. To unravel the mystery of this crime, they had to dig deeper into the life of Basa and figure out who AS was. Basa was a native of Damagut City in the Philippines, where she is now buried. After graduating from Assumption College in Manila, she immigrated to the US in the mid-1960s. Before her death, she worked as a respiratory therapist at the now closed Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. As for the real identity of AS, Detective Joe Stachula had to wait a couple of months before getting a lead. Finally, he was asked by the Evanston police to contact a certain Dr. Jose Chua to get more information about Basa's case. Dr. Chua and his wife Remy, both Filipinos, were hesitant at first, but later agreed to share their story after Detective Stachula assured them he's open to anything. Dr. Chua claimed that his wife would go into a trance-like state and become possessed by a spirit. That spirit introduced herself as Basa and went as far as naming her murderer, Alan Showery, as well as specific proof like the jewelry that was stolen from her and the names and phone numbers of relatives that could identify that proof. All this led to the arrest of Alan Showery, an orderly working at the same hospital as the victim and Dr. Chua's wife. The jewelry that Alan gave to his girlfriend was also positively identified as belonging to Basa, prompting the suspect to give a full confession. Alan ended up pleading guilty, was sentenced to imprisonment, but was eventually released in 1983, less than 5 years of serving his sentence. Do the dead find a way to come back through another person? And more so because of the tragic circumstances of their demise, to seek justice in the wrongdoing, like what happened with her. I think it is. I think it's possible. Now, here's something else I wanted to share with you folks. So far, thank you for listening to these stories. And don't mind me, I had a very long day, so I'm a little bit tired, but not too bad. Again, is there a connection between the ghosts of the Philippines and here in Hawaii? And again, I nod my head. And here's why. This is a family story that was shared within my family for many generations. And I've only shared it once before, and that was during Halloween. The story is called Fooled by Darkness. On a very dark night, in a place now erased by time because it was that long ago, a man is riding his horse. This is the time when immigrants came to Hawaii and were living in plantations. Not much to do back in those days. So for whatever reason, he decided to get on his horse and go for a little stroll in the night. The moon is out. Everything is quiet. He's going down a dirt road. Nearby, you hear the whisper of sugarcane as the wind blows through it. And then, off in the distance, because it is so quiet, you hear the sound of a baby crying. And when he hears this sound, he immediately stops and looks around and peers off into the darkness in front of him. And as he is looking off into the darkness, he sees on the road this small little bundle just laying there. Slowly, he rides his horse up to the little bundle that is there on the road. And as he gets closer, the baby is crying louder and louder and louder and louder. He gets off the horse. He approaches the little bundle that is squirming, covered in a blanket. And he picks up what he finds out to be a baby. Baby looks at him with big, innocent eyes. And he looks back. Takes the baby to his horse. Gets on the horse. And proceeds to again continue what he's doing. He's probably thinking to himself, I need to get this baby back to his little town that he lives in and see if they can identify the child. So he turns the horse around and he goes back. And then the baby starts crying again. But as the baby starts to cry, it's not just the sound of a baby. There's an underlying tone to the cry of the baby. And it gets worse and worse. The horse is startled by all of this. The horse practically rears on its hind legs. As he's trying to calm his horse down, he takes the baby to check on the child, removes the blanket from the baby's face. As you can tell, I'm not good at making the sound of a demonic baby, but that's exactly what it was the sound of a demonic baby. Because when he looked at the face of the child, it was no longer the face of a child. It was the face of some inhuman monster. Not looking like anything he had ever seen in his life. Anywhere. And unfortunately, that's where the story ends. In that one terrifying moment, when someone just happened to be alone by himself, out in the dark, and was fooled by something even darker. Remember the story about the babies? The babies that died that were not baptized or died under unfortunate circumstances, I should say, that are in the Philippines. You know, when I first heard that story, I knew nothing. All I know is that that's a scary story. That's a really spooky story. You know, I heard this story and I tried to imagine that, you know, in my head. And I did a pretty good job because the story stayed with me all these years. You know, this never went away. There is a thread of connection right there to these stories of the Philippines. Keep in mind also, that back in those days, one of the first immigrants to arrive here to Hawaii and work on the plantations were people from the Philippines as well. Something to keep in mind, something to think about. My dad is a great storyteller. I think the reason why I am so um, drawn to the paranormal and to ghosts and spooky places and stories is because when I was growing up, my dad would get together with his friends, and in Hawaii, that's one of their favorite things to do is sit down, have a couple drinks, laugh, have a good time, daytime. Yeah, oh, good fun, kanakapila, everybody having a good time, playing music and everything. But as soon as the sun goes down and the sun is gone, no miss, yeah. My dad would and his friends would talk about ghost stories. So that's where it all started. And I remember a story that my dad shared with me as a child. And this happened in Kalihi, of all places. And so the story goes that my dad's friends were out one night, sitting down and gathered around in a little circle, drinking their beer, talking story, having a good time, enjoying themselves. And of course, they did it for a long time. It starts to get later into the day and into the night. And then it's late at night. And back in those days, people, yeah, this is not like the first story. They're driving around in their cars and doing their thing. But when it gets late at night, there's less and less cars and it starts to get very quiet, even for a place like Kalihi back in the day. All of a sudden, while they're sitting there and they're having their drinks and enjoying each other's company, one of them gets this feeling like there's somebody watching them. I can imagine because I've felt this before. All the hairs on the back of his head, maybe on his arms, his legs, whatever, they all stand up at once, right? Because you can feel someone staring at you. And usually, when somebody is staring at you, you got that feeling. Usually, it's someone behind you, right? You turn around to see if somebody's behind you. Maybe somebody just happened to be there and for one reason or another just stopped and is looking at the people drinking. But this particular time, that wasn't the case. This person turns around and behind them is these old wooden telephone poles. If you remember those, any of you that live in Hawaii or wherever you're from, you remember those old wooden telephone poles? Like in the summertime, these wooden telephone poles would have termites around the lights. Termites would make homes in them and such. There's this old wooden telephone pole. But then his eyes, start to follow like radar where that feeling of being observed is coming from. And so his eyes start to go up the telephone pole. And as his eyes start to go up the telephone pole, what he sees, which is absolutely impossible, he sees the legs of a person. And as his eyes go up that telephone pole, the legs continue to go up till there is the rest of this person. And this person is so tall that he is leaning on to the telephone pole, looking down. And at that time, I'm going with the flow with these stories that I tell. Everyone else turns around and they're looking because they see that one guy looking. So everyone stopped drinking. I can see a few of them maybe had their beers up to their mouth and they're about to take a sip. Everyone stops, their eyes go up the telephone pole. And at the top of that telephone pole is what my dad said, a giant. Obviously, his face shrouded in darkness, glowing eyes, with a cigar in his mouth. You know, to me, I wouldn't know what to say, but if I was there, I was one of them, I'd be up. I'd be up and I'd be running. Because what they said that guy was doing, this giant was just laughing at them, mocking them, maybe because of their size. Maybe because of their size, just laughing at them. What can you do? You can't do nothing to that. So to me, obviously, they all got up and they ran away. Probably never went there to drink again. Maybe some of them gave up drinking. Maybe some of them got sober. I bet you, almost all of them were immediately sober when they saw that. He was good. His cigar was going quite well. Um, the Giants of the Philippines. Exact same description, even with the cigar. Back then again, I knew nothing about that. Nothing. It wasn't until like years later that I started hearing stories about this when I was getting involved with the paranormal. On Kauai, there's a sighting of the Capri. People are working on a plantation again. There's that connection with the plantation and people from the Philippines, and they're working in the fields, and all of a sudden this huge giant just comes out from the forest and starts chasing them. Connections, threads to the Philippines. A little bit more than threads. Last story, and then I'll say Pahana to all of you folks. So, again, years ago, and my dad also shared this story with me. Um, he used to live in Manoa Valley. That's where he grew up. My dad had several stories about Manoa Valley, from valleys from witches to ghosts, all kind of interesting things. I remember this one particular story he shared with me, because what my dad would like to do, my dad would like to get into the car with all of us, and we'd go out and go for a cruise, right? And he would like to go visit the old neighborhood. So I remember how this story would go. My dad would take us out into Manoa, and then we would go down this old road. It was a back road behind the stores and everything, like Safeway and stuff, if memory serves me correct, or where those places ended up being. And this road, on either side of this road, is tall California grass. And when you go there at night and you're in the car and you see the headlights shining on the grass, you see the grass kind of swaying back and forth. Yeah, like there's somebody, almost like there's somebody there, but it's the wind, right? It's the wind. My dad would always tell this story and then drive us there. Um, I had this uncle, and there was a story about that back road in Manoa. There's a story about a white lady. And my uncle, he would hear the story. Yeah, I mean, we'd have family gatherings and everything else. Not even talking about ghost stories, weddings, whatnot, birthdays, whatever the case may be, or, just getting together. And of course, like I told you before, my dad likes to tell stories. We talk about ghosts and everything. And then it would bring up the white lady of Manoa. And my uncle was like, yeah, that freaking white lady. Hey, bullshit. No way. That's not true. I never even seen the white lady. He's just going off on a tangent and just saying, no way, not real. So keep in mind, my dad is driving me. He's driving us towards this place. And so he tells me that one night, my uncle was so intent on proving that this lady was not real. Excuse me. That what he did was he decided to get in his car, I believe it was with his wife, and they drove down that back road. So they get there and they're driving down the road. It's late at night, of course. What better time to encounter a ghost, especially a well known one? And so they're driving down that road 1 o'clock in the morning or so. And as they're driving down the road, they see the same thing that we would see, the grass, California grass moving on either side of the road. You know, the wind blowing through it and such. But then all of a sudden, turn off the lights. All of a sudden, the car stops. The lights go out. The California grass is no longer moving. That is, until you hear the sound like someone is parting the grass. And just at that moment, the lights of the car go back on. What my uncle saw from the left side of the road was a woman, all in white. An old woman with two big white dogs. I'm getting scared telling this story. She starts to look at my uncle. Deadpan expression, except for the eyes. The eyeballs are going, looking directly at him, giving him that look like, you don't believe in me, huh? Oh, I heard about you. The woman starts to go to the front of the car. And then just observes him. Like, you're the one. You're the one that's not real. Not me. You're the one. My uncle is just sitting there. You know, his eyes must have been like 50% of his face. His wife, the same thing. He starts to roll up his windows as best as he can. He starts to roll up the windows, and I'm sure he probably, you know, it's those old cars. You know how you gotta crank the window up. So imagine trying to crank the window. He probably, you know, lost his grip a couple of times trying to roll the window up, and finally did. You know, and as he's starting to, he's getting the window almost all the way up. He's starting to lock the door, and that woman comes to his side of the door, leans forward and looks at him, and it's just like one last time, just saying, well, you know, the next time you have an idea about me not being real, think again, and whatever you do, don't ever come back here again. She turns around with those big dogs. And before I end this, okay, I gotta say something. A lot of local people probably feel the same way I do. Because I grew up near California grass, okay? I actually grew up in a very haunted neighborhood. Bruh, at night, stay away from the bushes, okay? Don't go near them. They look okay in the daytime. But let me tell you, all bets are off at night. And when she went back into the bushes, all bets were off. All of them. Bushes closed. After a few moments, the wind starts to blow again. So you can imagine, for someone like me with my dad and my mom and the rest of my brothers and everything, going down that road, I never ever saw the white lady. Never did. Never did. Thank you. I never saw her. Thank you, God. Never saw her. But you see the California grass moving around. And you just don't want to say, I don't believe you. And with that said, folks, I just want to say that, again, you're looking at a connection with the white lady here in Hawaii. She's not only in Manoa. I'm sure, from what I understand, she's also at Makapu. There's other sightings in Waimanalo and other parts of the island. This woman is pretty much real. There's a lot of sightings. As a matter of fact, there's famous stories, I believe, from Glenn Grant. I would advise anyone who is interested in reading stories of Hawaii to get the Obaki Files. I highly recommend it. And while I say that as well, I highly recommend that if you're ever in Hawaii and you want to go, and yeah, that's right, Aristocat, the white lady. If you ever want to go on a fantastic ghost tour, check out Mysteries of Honolulu with Lopaka Kapanui. Fantastic storyteller. I try my best with my stories, but fantastic storyteller. But there's that connection, folks. There's that connection. So is it just me reading stories to you? Would you want to even try and see if it's just Shibai? Thank you, Kimchi Squared. I appreciate it. Thank you, Cool. I appreciate it. Or is there something more? Do we dare say, I don't believe you? And look for the coordinates and drive down that spooky road and even dare tempt fate in any way at all? Do we? So, everyone, shows that are coming up. Let's see. I made a list the other day. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I try my best to tell stories, and I do my best. Hopefully they are scary. And everyone that's here, Ozzy, Rotman, Aristocat, Kimchi Squared, Polly Vlogs, Boogie 808, whoever's out there tonight, thank you very much. Rain, thank you. Just to give you an update on stories that are coming up. And again, folks, do me a favor if you don't mind. I'm trying to hit 2,000 subscribers to see what happens. But if you don't mind, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And also share it with your friends. Hey, there's this dude that tells ghost stories, goes to haunted places, interviews people about ghosts and all things Hawaii. I would appreciate it. Let your friends know. Come, tell them to come by. Check it out. The channel is moving forward, and you all make it interesting as well. Oh, really, Aristocat? What I was going to say is stories that are coming up, shows that are coming up. On Monday, we take another trip back to Japan. Thank you, Kimchi Squared. I appreciate that. Thank you. I truly appreciate that, folks. Trust me. I really appreciate it. Not bad, 1,800 right now. Monday, we're going back to Japan. Ghost Stories of Japan. We're going back to Japan. We're going to do ghost stories again. I'm going to show you. Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you, Aristocat. I appreciate that. I'm going to show you my haunted doll, my Japanese haunted doll that I got, I think it was last week. So she's going to be in the background. Yeah. So you get to see my new Japanese haunted doll. And I'll also be sharing stories again about Japan. I'm trying my best to get into reading other people's stories. I think I get more into it, though, when I'm just talking. I get a little bit more into it. But yeah, so I'll be doing that on Monday. And then Tuesday, I don't know if Cool is still here. Brother Cool, I got to talk to him today. Cool, I hope it's okay if I call you that, my friend. Um, Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Mahalo. Cool's gonna be on Tuesday. We're gonna be talking about the healing marchers. Cool, my wonderful friend, my wonderful blessed friend. I am looking forward to talking to you. We're gonna be talking about the healing marchers. If you ever heard about the night marchers, this is something entirely new to me. And the story that he shared with me was absolutely amazing. So on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, of ghosts and dreams, of ghosts and dreams. It's a little bit of a different type of show, but still, I appreciate all the different variations on spirits, including the ones that are unique and beautiful. So, of ghosts and dreams. Thank you, Kimchi Squared. We're doing that on Tuesday. So, one show after another, Monday and Tuesday. And after that, well, we'll see how it goes. I'm thinking of doing some other shows that are coming up. Again, folks, okay, hold on a second. The Nomadic Hippie, go check out his channel. Poly Vlogs, check out his channel too, folks. Great, great content. As a matter of fact, on Nomadic Hippie, my good traveling friend, he's does some incredible videos, all things considered, what's going on right now too, of points of interest in travel, but he has done some looking into when it comes to the paranormal. So go over there and check it out. Give it a thumbs up, you guys. Give these people a thumbs up. Cool if you have a channel too. Everybody out there, go support each other, yeah? Please, by all means, do that. Some other stories that are coming, other things that are coming up. There's going to be a show on the Ouija board. I really have to prepare myself for that. People are getting misconstrued about the Ouija board. They're thinking I'm going to be using an Ouija board. No, I'm not using an Ouija board. I am not. I'll be doing a show about the Ouija board. And then later on, during the month of Halloween, check out Koo's channel, you guys. If you like that, check it out, my friends. I'll go check it out too. I gotta go look for his channel. We'll talk about your channel when I interview you. So look forward to the show about Ouija boards, spirits that have followed me home. Thankfully, that's not a whole plethora of stories, but yes, that has happened too. I mean, there's some shows that are coming up, shows about haunted dolls and other things that I'm working on right now. There's a list. I actually have a list of shows that I'm doing, so be on the lookout for that. Check out that, folks. You see what Nomadic Hippie just said? Check that out. Putting a 24-hour cam in the morgue in the old Riverview Mansion, which is a phenomenal place. The cam will stream 24 hours a day coming next month as we get closer to the Halloween season. Amazing. Thank you for that, Nomadic Hippie. I appreciate that, my friend. Rick Sari, fantastic person. I look forward to when all of this gets back to normal and then we can actually get together and do stuff. Shows are coming up, folks. Also, it's good if you subscribe to this channel because I do surprise streams where I don't say anything. For the most part, I'll say coming up, but you won't know when, and you'll know at that point. Hawaiian Joe, how long have you been here, my friend? Yeah, there we go. I miss going out. You guys already know Joe. He's been a guest many times. Phenomenal storyteller. We're gonna have to redo one of the shows. That's okay. We're gonna do it, and it's gonna be just as great as the first time. Thank you, cool, everybody. I look forward. Oh, okay, that's okay, Joe. I look forward to the healing marchers. If you're into Hawaiiana, if you're into all of that, if you like that type of vibe, and I don't see why you wouldn't, check out Brother Koo this coming Tuesday when we get together of Ghosts and Dreams. and we will talk about the healing marchers and a whole bunch of other stuff that I found absolutely fascinating. And this is going to be a great show. And I want to do shows like this also with Joe because of his knowledge as well. And this is the place to, get that knowledge, and do something with that knowledge and share it in a whole new way, hopefully, from the heart. And I know you folks are of the heart as well. So again, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed those stories from the Philippines. I got to tell you straight up right now, and go check out Joel's group, Hawaiian Hauntings on Facebook. Of all the stories I told tonight, out of all those stories, the one of the white lady at the bridge with the little girl in the back seat, that scared me, okay? I was scared as I was telling you that story. And isn't that the beauty of storytelling? Thank you, Ozzy. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. I really appreciate you guys like that. That's the beauty of storytelling. When you I don't know if I'm pulling other people into the story, but if I pull myself into the story, then that's something. And that story scared me. I've never heard a story like that in my entire life. And I've heard many ghost stories from, many different sources. That scared me. So that was the best for me, sharing those stories. And again, keep in mind, we're going to be doing more and more stories of stories in the Philippines. We're going to also be doing stories again with Japan and other places as well. This is a place to meet and greet and see what happens. So again, thank you so much for being here. I had a good time. Thank you. I loved all the stories too. I really did. I can't wait to share more and hear from other people too. Oh, before I go, once again, if you would like to be a guest on this show, on this program, it's really, really easy. Drop me a comment, or you can reach me. I'll give you my social media again. You can find me on Facebook. Look for my group, which I know Aristocat is a part of. Look for Ghosts of Hawaii. Ask to be a member there. My name, Obaki Hunter, is on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram, all lowercase, ghosts_of_Hawaii. You can also reach me at Gmail at _ all the letters, an underscore but lowercase, Obaki Hunter 51 at gmail.com. Trust me, I'll get back to you. There's a lot of shows that I'm working on and stuff right now with Halloween coming up. I'll get back to you sooner than you think. So you can reach me that way as well. Okay, or leave a comment that you want to be on the show. All you need is Skype. Skype is easy to get. So easy. It's an app now. You can use it on your phone or whatever you want as well. Polly Bear and other people too that are here. If you want to share something as well, seriously, check it out. Let's get together and let's have a show. Real simple to reach me. Real simple to reach me, guys. Yes, thank you, cool. I look forward to the stories, and all you have to share next Tuesday. So everybody, thank you again for being here. I will talk to you folks again soon. And I hope you folks have a good night. And with what's going on in today's world, you know what? Even though we have to stay apart, we can come together in a place like this, and we can do a lot. The distance should not stop us from being people. So, keep it going. Keep Pono going, yeah? Do all that Pono. That means stay together and just move forward. Imua Ohana, yeah? Let's move forward as one. I'll talk to you folks again later. Ghosts of Hawaii, you're home for a dose of ghosts, and sometimes something down the road trying to get your attention. Take care, everybody. God bless you all. Aloha.